Anyone, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat window. You can either put them out to everyone, you can put them just to me in particular. I can make sure they get read out, and we can always unmute if we need more clarifications on questions or anything. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
All right. Hello, everyone. This panel brings together Baltimore, where I am, with New Orleans, which is where Toya and Fernando are located right now. Much warmer down there, I've heard. At this time, we're still dealing with 50-degree weather, even though it is at least sunny here in Baltimore today. My name is Sarah Fouts, and I am an assistant professor in the Department of American Studies at UMBC, and I'm also the director of the Public Humanities minor program at UMBC, and I am really excited to be here to talk about a upcoming project that I'm working on and kind of have been working on for a long time with Fernando and Toya, which we'll hear about in this panel today. Fernando and Toya, I'll go ahead and let you all introduce yourselves, and then we can kind of launch into the panel.
You wanna go first, Toya?
I can jump in. Peace, y'all. My name's Toya. I'm born and raised in New Orleans. And I originally met both Sarah and Fernando when we were working at the New Orleans Workers Center for Racial Justice, where I organized Stand with Dignity, the Black group of workers who was organizing around community and housing, work, and decriminalization issues. And that's my background. And I currently run my own project called Project Hustle, where I want to focus more on the hustle economy in New Orleans, the informal economy in New Orleans, where people go when they're structurally unemployed and underemployed and excluded and exploited in their workplaces.
My name is Fernando. Hello, everyone. I'm a documentarian and interpreter most of the time these days, and I'm originally from Michoacan, Mexico. I've been in New Orleans almost 9 years, and I also met Toya and Sarah. Sarah as the first time I came to New Orleans in 2012, and then I was part of this caravan, this bus. I don't know if you guys heard of it. It's called the DocuBus. It's a bus full of undocumented people traveling throughout the South. And New Orleans was one of the stops. We were headed to the DNC in Charlotte, North Carolina, I think that year, the year that Obama was gonna accept his second nomination, and he was nearing 2 million deportations in his first term. Anyway, that's kind of the context. That's how I ended up in New Orleans. And then a year later, I started working at the same organization than Toya, but with a different project called the Congress of Day Laborers. Sarah was a volunteer. I mean, more than a volunteer, right? It was almost like a coworker, but was not getting paid. Throughout all these years, being kind of like working together in different things are like kind of more official, but also like we're just kind of homies. So.
Yeah, and what Fernando failed to say was that the bus broke down in New Orleans, and I was the one sent to bring them water, and it was August 2012.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
that
the
means
bus had no AC, and the way Fouts and I bonded, she showed up with yerba mate, and it was so hot, and we were just sitting next to an IHOP. I had no idea where it was. It was so hot, and yeah, that's how we met. We bonded, and a year later, I was here. In that trip, I also met Toya. Toya gave us like a tour through like all the affected areas since Katrina had happened, and just like talking about the organizing that they were doing in the city at the time. Very
And so that-
inspiring people. So yeah, I'm glad I got to work with Toya and Fouts at some point.
Yeah, and that makes me realize that it's been a decade since we've known each other, and a decade that we've been working in different capacities in different ways and engaging with people and each other for a long-term period, which a lot of people have talked about in the symposium so far. I get so some of the kind of key themes we want to hit during this talk today is, which is going to be very informal. We don't have slides or anything like that, but we do want to make sure that we talk about kind of, you know, our project, which is called Project Neutral Grounds, at the intersection between people, street food, and the hustle. And really want to think about the process, how this project emerged, as well as, of course, and again, to Melissa and everyone else, we're going to talk a little bit about food, and I know we haven't had a lunch break, so forgive us here. But we're going to kind of talk about the content of the idea of the project, right? What's the base of this street vending project? What does it mean for a city like New Orleans? And what does it mean beyond just the South, or, you know, especially in a time of kind of disasters or ubiquitous and things like that. Other kind of themes we want to talk about is the relationship between humanities and organizing spaces, which Fernando and Toya and I talked about yesterday. And, you know, I think it's a, you know, an important question, especially from an academic perspective. I think it seems more obvious on the ground. And then ways of, you know, kind of the ups and downs and challenges within connecting universities with people, communities. How do we do better in those ways? And these are all themes that have been addressed throughout the symposium, and it's really been insightful thus far. So I guess maybe Toya or Fernando, I'll say this part and then kind of pass it on to Toya and Fernando to maybe talk about the content of the project itself and how it came about. But what I think is really important to highlight is the ways in which we did come about this project, which is, you know, it kind of complements my positionality as an academic who does community engaged work, Toya as an organizer who's working with these hustle economies, and then Fernando as an amazing documentarian who's done just like incredible photos. I encourage you to follow him on Instagram to see his great work. But it really complements all of our you know, not only 10 years of working together, but also the different areas of which we bring to this project. And then I'll let one of you all go ahead and kind of explain the project, because we haven't done that yet.
You want to go first, Toya? You want me to go first?
Yeah, take it.
All right. Yeah, so I'm not sure if you guys have had a chance to read a description of the project or just kind of talk casually with Sarah about it. But the idea is, at some point, I think we called it a graduation of our, or some kind of like stepping stone, or you know, out of our 10 years, almost 10 years of knowing each other. And like Sarah said, like working in very different capacities. And also we're trying to, I guess, do things better than we have in the past, because, you know, I guess, yeah, you don't really learn something until you do it. And if you do it wrong, there's always a chance, I guess, to do better. So the idea of this project, like Fouts mentioned, like we are kind of, it's just like coming together and doing what we're usually doing every day together, and more, you know, aimed into addressing certain issues, into highlighting the specific people and their stories. And yeah, this idea of creating an archive that will, you know, serve, hopefully we're trying to think about in a way that it will be, everyone will have access to it. If not to be there in person for the in-person events that we want to have, but if not, they can find all the information somewhere, either online or also physically. So the idea of the project is to create this sort of multimedia profiles of at least 10 food vendors that live in New Orleans. And we have identified all of these people. Toya, if you want to talk a little more about that, but we're trying to be very intentional and who is included in the project. We wanted to have a good range of different ages and different styles of food, from like the traditional Southern, very fried, everything fried, pork chops, all of that, to all these younger chefs that are trying all these new like vegan trends, and everyone in between. From people who started selling tamales after Katrina to now they have their own, lunch trucks, their own taco trucks, or things like that. So we're trying to not only like highlight these individuals, but also bring them together in a way that they can also get to interact with each other, and like learning from each other. So yeah, honestly, I'm thinking about it as something like really fun instead of too academic or too serious. But the idea is to create these profiles for each one of them. We're going to document each one of them on their day-to-day life to see, how the hustle part of who they are. And also we will try to record a session where they're cooking a dish of their preference. And also we want to do a more in-depth interview where they sit down and we ask them questions about, the food, the hustle, their, who they are, what inspires them, what motivates them. And yeah, the idea is to be able to collect all this information, and then there's several things that we want to do with these interviews, with all this material. First, we will create a small documentary for each one of them, and we also have a plan for a scene where we hopefully will transcribe we will transcribe the interviews, not hopefully. And working with other people in the community to help us do a lot of these things, because I don't want to do a scene, but there's people who are really good at it. And same with a website. So the idea is that once we have these two events, the plan is to have two events in person and highlight half of the individuals that we will be profiling on each event. And yeah, I mean, we're still working, but what we've imagined is that this event will be a place where these food vendors can use it as a stage for whatever, and hopefully also have a facilitated conversation to see what the hustle is like for them. I'm not sure if we want to invite people who maybe have decision power that could influence the situation, the challenges that a lot of these hustlers have. And yeah, so the idea is that when people come to the event, they get the experience of seeing these interviews, from hearing from the source, to take something with them, the scene, and whoever is not able to come, hopefully will have a website ready so they can also check that out. But I don't know, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but let me know if I miss anything, Fouts or Toya.
As far as the project, that's great. But I think what I would like to share is the stories and narratives that we get to capture. Everybody know New Orleans to be somewhat of a a gumbo pot of culture, right? And I feel like these stories can tell that same story, right? It can go back all the way back to I don't know what's happening.
This is the top result.
My computer is doing something weird. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Chromebook. I'm an Apple person. I'm on a Chromebook and I'm an Apple person. I'm understand. So specifically the Black women that I'm bringing into the project, like they have some amazing stories. Like these are Black women who raised me, I grew up with, right? Black women will cook their food and sell plates to buy a gift for a baby shower or to throw a baby shower, right? To put money on people's books who've been locked up in a carceral state, right? To pay a bill so that their family could keep the lights on and the water on, right? This is the story of them and food and how they use their food, not only to feed their families, but to help their families continue to thrive, right? We know that we have the Latinx families who came down some before and some right after Katrina to help us rebuild the city, and folks wanted a taste of the food from their native land. So that's what the tamales come from, and that's where we get more food trucks to cater to those taste buds, and for us to even be introduced to it, and for us to even begin to kind of, and the exciting part is the younger people, the people who are under 35, who are some of the people we will bring into the conversation, how they've kind of intertwined a bunch of different tastes across the country and even begin to make vegan dishes so that we could begin to have these same tastes and these same flavors, but with a healthy twist to it. So I think that's really exciting. I think that's the most exciting part is like knowing and feeling the stories in the background. That's my dogs, y'all. They think this is my play voice, but I'm talking to y'all and not playing with them, obviously. Yeah, knowing the stories in the background that come with the meals and the tastes, and continue to add to that narrative around New Orleans being the melting pot and how we keeping it going.
We have a question. Gina Marie Lewis says, have you considered a methodology like photo voice to facilitate the community identifying important questions and outcomes they'd like to see and allow them to show the world from their own eyes and words?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll go to we'll kind of give an overview of what it'll look like, but I definitely think these are great suggestions for ideas. Yeah,
I think
Toya, go ahead.
I think to add to that, I think there will be moments in capturing the stories where people will name some of the things that's hindered them from doing their work, from becoming food vendors, like when they have done food vendors, what's been in their way, right? And I think we have partners, we haven't necessarily talked about this precisely, but we have partners who can help us turn some parts of this narrative into, to get some research done, do some data analyzing, and build a report that helps support some policy narrative and policy changes that contribute to like carceral state, weakening the carceral state, defunding the police, and all these other pieces. Now, that's not our work, but we can do the work to pass it on to those folks.
Yeah, and to kind of give a bigger overview, so we have a timeline that we're setting up, and I'll kind of walk through that. And so the idea is, we're starting this project over the summer, and we'll start with really kind of launching we all are used to doing field work, academics, documentarians, organizers, right? And really you don't know what the ideas are until you get into the field, right? And so, I mean, we know because we're close to a lot of these folks, but, so we wanted to start with a story circle where we bring together all the participants who we've already been in touch with. And so we'll use that kind of space to identify the key themes that we're really going to look at. And those will be the key themes when we do the actual interviews with each of the street food vendors. We'll kind of focus on those areas. And then we're also partnering with the Southern Food and Beverage Museum, which is they have a demo kitchen with cameras installed, and Fernando's a really talented editor and photographer, so we're going to record them. Each person will have identified their dish that they want to make, and then we'll kind of film them making their dish, and then Fernando will edit those into these mini documentaries for each people. All the materials will be archived in the Nunez Community College Library, which is part of the Southern Food and Beverage Museum. So we'll put, we'll kind of have this kind of long-term archival project, and then these different events that Fernando mentioned that will take place in the fall, and then one in the spring. One will take place at the Southern Food and Beverage Museum itself, and the other, we're still identifying the space, but we're thinking about Baldwin and Company, which is a Black-owned bookstore in New Orleans. So those are kind of the different pieces of it. And then, like Fernando mentioned and Toya mentioned, right, we'll have this historical component that will also highlight the different stories through the zine, which we're partnering with Shira. What's Shira's last name, Toya? I can't remember. So we do kind of have this. Yeah, we kind of have this kind of plan for kind of how it's the materials will come into play and the different ways of incorporating the voices of the folks. I don't know if Toya or Fernando, you want to add on to that, or?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the initial idea, or I guess, was because the 20th anniversary of Katrina is coming up in 2025. And that's just wild to even think about. I remember watching that from Mexico. I was back home. I was 15 at the time, 14, and like never even crossed my mind that I will end up living in this place. But obviously, like the environment hasn't really gotten any better. We've had tornadoes like 2 weeks ago, is in March, and I don't know, maybe Toya can elaborate a little more, and like if this is normal. I've only been here almost 9 years, but it is a little wild that every week we're getting, tornado warnings, and that they actually happening and destroying home. So it is, aimed into, all right, Toya says it's not normal. So yeah, it's, I feel like, New Orleans is such a place. I mean, I don't want to romanticize it because it's rough, but it's very resilient, but also so fragile, like we're so close to the ocean, under sea level. Infrastructure is like over 100 years old, a lot of things. So coming up to the anniversary, the 20th anniversary, it's yeah, how have things really changed, although yes, there's like somewhat very progressive, kind of progressive politics and politicians, and but I mean, it's at the end of the day, our people who, like a lot of people here, rely on the hustle economy, and after, for instance, after the lockdown started in 2020, like Jazz Fest, all these festivals get canceled, everything really. I personally lost a lot of work, also as a freelance photographer. So I think we want to also tell the story how, like, people are inventive in these situations, and what are the ways that people still, because I mean, all of these people survived the pandemic, or have survived the pandemic, and they still have running their businesses. So that's kind of like the story that we want to, like, what's the heart of the hustle, because these people work so hard, like so hard. Running a pop-up is so much work, and I think like that's barely ever seen. So
Yeah, I think I would add, I mean, when we talk about being resilient after like natural disasters, I think every time we have to be resilient from a natural disaster, we have to be resilient against a structural disaster. Like disaster capitalism has been real during Katrina, during Ida. The fact that during Ida, our mayor refused to declare Ida a natural disaster, people lost a lot of opportunities to get funding from their insurance companies, from FEMA, in a number of places, right? And how do we be resilient through that, and how do we use the hustle economy to be through that? Fernando talked about how hard people work. Some people are working low wage jobs and during their hustles, right? Like, we are resilient from natural disasters as well as disaster capitalism and oppression, anti-Blackness, racism, like all the things we have to be resilient against. And when do we stop having to be resilient? When do we get to just thrive? How do we build economies and structures so that we can just thrive? I think that's a story we want to tell in 20 and at the 20th anniversary of Katrina. And I think we also want to tell a story about how we have built mutual aid groups that actually provide mutual aid, not just giving people what they could give, piling up things that people didn't ask for to give to people. How do we give people what they want and what they're asking for? And how do we move around some privilege, right? And how do we change the word from privilege to power? Privilege is power, privilege is wealth, privilege is access. And how do we move those things around via mutual aid, as a result of these things we face?
And I think to kind of add on to what Fernando and Toya are both saying, and kind of build on from the earlier presentation with Nicole King and Tahir Mahdi and crew, thinking about these approaches to this research is what we do here in Baltimore at the Baltimore Field School is this very much like working towards anti-extractive approaches to research. And I think what Fernando and Toya and myself, even though I've been away from New Orleans for now 5 years, which is wild, but I'm there a lot anyway. But what we've tried to do is build these relationships with all these folks that we're working with. It's not like we're just jumping in and saying, hey, do you want to do this? These are folks that we've known in different capacities for a long time. And it's, kind of built with them, talking to them, getting their ideas, instead of just like Fernando mentioned early on, like when he and I have done, we did a food documentary project for the Southern Foodways Alliance. And I think we're both very critical of our approach to that, which in some ways was in some ways, not all was extractive, right? We like, and I'll take most of the blame for that. Not really knowing the folks, just being like, we want to hear your story. But in this case, it feels like, Toya has a really deep relationship with a lot of the vendors. Fernando has a deep relationship with a lot of the vendors. I have a deep relationship with a couple of the vendors too. So it's like this collaboration in which it is a collaboration, and it is kind of building ideas together. It's humanities, it's organizing. Like Toya said, it's thinking about policies too, right? This criminalization, these themes that would inevitably come out of this work. Because what's happening in this tourist economy in New Orleans is people are, their culture is being extracted, commodified, sold in the French Quarter, and then where it has actually grew and developed in the neighborhoods outside of these tourist areas, it's being criminalized, it's being regulated in ways that is just really, not only has COVID restricted a lot of it, but also kind of the city policies are actually kind of trying to regulate this culture, the music and the food, in these different ways. So I think those are important themes to also kind of highlight that I think are going to be part of these bigger issues and kind of next steps that we take out of this project. Do you want to add anything else, or should we open up to questions?
If the panelists are, excuse me, losing my voice. If the panelists are have what contributed what they need to, we can open it up to questions, and you can put them in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself if you'd like to. You can chat to everyone, or you can chat to me, and I can read them out if you'd like.
I'm not sure if we talk a lot about like the relationship between humanities and organizing.
Fernando, that was kind of what the question that's bubbling up for me is, so you three have been in partnership for a while. And I was just curious about the percolation time before you, it seems like you, to realize you're all coming at from different roles, and how long did it take before you sort of were able to fully speak each other's language? I just feel like even the partnerships among the three of you is a type of work that takes time, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's just been one thing leading to the other since the beginning. Because my interactions with Sarah at the beginning when I first moved here was very strictly to like um, volunteer work with the organization. Sarah used to accompany a lot of people to court or to ICE check-ins, so that was kind of like the way we, and then I don't know, whenever there will be like a big event, uh, helping a lot with like logistics. So it wasn't always, just like, oh yeah, let's do a cool project together. It was just more like, little by little. And I think we didn't really, I think it was very clear that we both like food a lot, very early on. And, but it wasn't until I left my position at Congreso that we started to like, think more intentionally about working, doing certain things together. With Toya, uh, she was an organizer with Stand with Dignity. I was an organizer with the Congress of Day Laborers, and although they both were housed under the same umbrella of the Worker Center, um, we each had our own campaigns, all of our members to attend to. So our work was mostly trying to bring both memberships together. I think that I will say that maybe where it all really started was on the anniversaries of Katrina, because we used to have a party every year at the Worker Center. And I think at that time, I'm a very visual person, obviously, and I get like, I don't know, astonished or surprised very easily. So I just remember seeing on a plate mac and cheese and fried plantains and like baked chicken. So it's like Central American and like New Orleans all in one plate. And I was like, and just like having the music and like the only problem was the language barrier, because we used to bring our members together. And yeah, for like food, it was always really important to like, most of the people that were in our membership were hardworking folks who have been working all day. Like you cannot ask them to come to a meeting at 6 p.m. from 6 to 9 and not have any food. So it's essential. Like food it makes things so much easier. And I think that's why we kind of, have mixed a lot of like we want to have good food, but at the same time we want to have these conversations. Anyway, I don't know if that's answering your question, but yeah, it took a long time, to get to know each other and to trust each other and to like know the way I slack a lot. I really like doing what I do, but I do sometimes like just I get very distracted with anything. So thankfully, like they know and they're very gracious about that. But yeah, like that. It takes some time. Sorry, I'm losing my voice too. I don't know if you want to add anything. So yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Particularly the deep dive of work that I ended up doing with Sarah was when we began to like notice that the work that Stan was doing stood on the backs of a lot of amazing history, like Black worker organizing history that happened in New Orleans. And we wanted to do the work to not only capture that history, to have a place where we could capture the work that we were currently doing. And Sarah kind of led us through creating the New Orleans Black worker organizing timeline, which essentially turned into a website and was really captioned and created, you know, by membership. Like we did workshops on how, you know, how to do interviews with people, like so that we can interview some of the folks who were still living, connected to some of those older stories that we wanted to add to our timeline. So I think that was a place where, you know, not only did I get to work with Sarah, but I got to understand the importance of documenting and remembering these pieces so that we can leave things behind for people to learn from, even if it's our mistakes, right? Being able to leave things behind for folks to be able to learn from what we did and what we accomplished and what we didn't accomplish.
I just wanted to say, I think that food is such an amazing, like, common ground for, you know, working in projects about other issues. And, you know, I indicated my family being from New Orleans and Kenner. And I mean, I always feel like, and maybe because I didn't grow up there, but I always feel like food is half of our culture there. You know, it's like a big old chunk of And so if you can bring people together around food, then, you know, talking about everything else becomes a greater possibility. And then I put something earlier in the chat. I just remember the stories my mother told me, and my mom is 87 years old now. So this is like back in the 1930s, 40s, and she would talk about the street vendors walking with the carts and, you know, the kind of songs that they would do. And I mean, if you all want to meet her, she'll talk to you. I swear to you, she will talk to you. But you got to be ready to sit and talk because she's going to talk. But yeah, it just, I don't know. I love this project. I'm going to follow you guys. I'm definitely following.
Hey, I still want to follow that because I think you guys clearly have these great relationships, and like food is this, when you break bread with someone, it just opens up the relationship in a different way. I try and always bring my students to break bread with people when we're working with them. But some of the things you said, like Fernando said, doing it wrong and the chance to do it better, which I think is great. And Toya was talking about the connection between kind of past and present organizing. So you guys have clearly been working together, you know, for a decade now. If you could go back and talk to like little Fouts or, you know, little Fernando, little Toya 10 years ago, I mean, what would you say? What advice would you offer from this vantage point that you're at now for people just starting out in this work?
Uh, I will say, let's just start sooner. Let's start working on it sooner. Yeah, I feel like I don't know. Yeah, we're all trying to figure out ourselves, and we don't really know what we're gonna get into. No, well, some people have it very clear. They're like, I want to do this, and I'm gonna do that. But yeah, I guess just, you know, it's gonna be okay. Just maybe start earlier, sooner. Yeah. What about you?
I would tell myself to be more patient. What I do and don't know, and do and don't understand, because and just like sitting in that, and because what I realized as a older person is that the acknowledgement of what I don't know has gained me the opportunity to learn those things, you know. Yeah, I was a lot less patient. I was like real hard on myself for not knowing and messing up.
I think for little Fouts over here, it would be, I mean, and this came out from Fernando and I think from Toya and from the people who I've worked with too, like in like doing storytelling type work, is not every story needs to be told. Like as simple as that. And being okay with that. Which, you know, I definitely am now, but I think back then I was like, why? You know, right? So I think that's the big thing that I would say.
Sarah, can
See
you
anyone
just
else? Oh, I'm sorry.
maybe?
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, can you maybe say a little bit more on that? Just you just made me curious. Like, not every story needs to be told. Like, are you talking about like how you have to learn to focus, or are you talking about like the yeah?
I think it can translate in a lot of different ways and apply in a lot of different ways, I guess. One, like, very tangible example is like there was, and Fernando will remember this, is we were doing an oral history project and photography project in a flea market, La Pulga, on the West Bank. And there was a woman who is just an amazing fixture in this space, and she makes pupusas. She's from El Salvador. And it was just like, talking to her, she's very powerful, clearly great story, but she just never wanted to be recorded. And we, definitely, like, I don't know, that's just a very basic level example. And it was, yeah, the best bank. True, exactly. And yeah, so that's like one example. And it took, I wasn't like mad, but I was just like, wow, what does that mean? And just like, it didn't need to be told. And then some of the things that people tell in the stories when this camera or this recorder's on, giving the stories back to people and saying, are you sure you want to include this? Or, or checking in with people, things like that. So I think it applies in a lot of different ways of how you, not only who you work with and whose stories you're recording and documenting, but also once they're documented, does that, kind of checking back in with folks, does that story need to be told? Do they want, so things like that. And I think there's a lot of other interpretations too. And Fernando might have, and Toya too might have other comments.
No, yeah, it reminds me to, sometimes just walking on the street, and most people here are very gracious when you ask them to take their photo. They're like, yeah, and post or whatever. But some people are like, they straight up say no, and it's been a humbling experience because it doesn't matter if, a friend of mine like Fouts says, oh, he is really good. Like, that person probably doesn't know, and even if I was, they're not obligated to, like, let me take their photo. So when that happens, it's like, oh yeah, it's like a reminder that not everyone knows you, and even if they did, like, they're not obligated. But that happens very rarely because people here, they like to have their photo taken, especially if, like, on a Sunday or something like that, at a second line. But yeah.
Oh, I guess the thing for me that connects to kind of this stream is as a younger organizer, I would enter a community, know that a problem is consistent amongst the people in community because they told me about it. And I remember getting excited and wanting to go to the person of power and tell them about it. But I also had to be patient and know that the community had to be ready to move and ask for what they wanted on their own. So me, just because I'm an organizer and I'm ready and I know their story, don't mean I get to go out and share and start making demands for them. Yeah, because that wasn't organizing. That was me learning they had a problem and trying to fix it for them. So, and that's another thing I learned about organizing is that I don't put people in movement as an organizer. I come with tools and ideas, and people self-select to be a part of the plan with the tools and ideas that I come with. And so, people are choosing for themselves. I'm not choosing for them. They're choosing for themselves. So autonomy is something that's real. Autonomy and consent got to live in all of this.
Wonderful. One last call out. Does anyone else have any other questions or discussion points they want to bring up real quick? I'm going to post one more time our link for our evaluation forms. Please do so. For anyone who doesn't know, we're going to have a virtual coffee chat here. We want to thank everyone that came in, and Fernando and Sarah and Toya, and for talking to us and bringing up these great, wonderful points. Definitely going to be following your project. So interesting. We thank you very, very much. Great shout out to everybody there. Anyone who wants to, we're going to have a virtual coffee chat here that will be just kind of a mixture of anyone who wants to talk about any of the sessions and have little, open discussions of what's going on from 2 to 2:30. So we'll stay right here. We'll wait for everyone. And other than that, please fill out the evaluation form. Let us know how everybody did. And we thank everybody for attending today.